history and ancestry. So we are here this afternoon to provide the opportunity for His Excellency to speak to the population of Trinidad and Tobago by way of the media and to take some of your questions. Excellency, welcome. Mr. Prime Minister. Thank you. Mr. Prime Minister, members of the government, Ghana's foreign minister and members of the Ghanaian delegation, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. I'm happy to be here this afternoon in this famous city of Port of Spain, capital of Trinidad and Tobago, and delighted to be the guest of its Prime Minister, the Honourable Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley, Member of Parliament. Mr. Prime Minister, this is a reciprocal visit to the one you paid to Ghana in May 2016. And I'm grateful to you, your government, and the people of Trinidad and Tobago for the warm welcome and hospitality accorded me and my delegation since our arrival late last night. Having Her Excellency the President, Madam Speaker, and several members of the Cabinet waiting to greet us at 11 p.m. with 4 military honors as gestures of friendship that my delegation and I will always treasure. It is good to be here again. In the 1980s, a group of West African friends and I made a habit of coming every year to participate in your celebrated carnivals. So I am something of a Trinidadian with lots of nostalgic memories. Over the last 2.5 years, the period of stay of my administration in office, the paths of our two nations have crossed in several areas of mutual concern, as we have had the opportunity of working together and attempting to draw investments into our respective countries. Today, Trinidadian shareholders own the majority of the shares of Republic Bank in Ghana, now one of the leading banks in our country. And Trinidadian investors are in the process of establishing in Ghana a petrochemical plant in fulfillment of their long-held aspirations, among other investments being considered in the country. On the other hand, Ghanaian companies like Niche Chocolate have started operations in this country, with other commercial operations such as the export of Ghanaian wax prints and shea butter into this country taking place. I'm thus here this afternoon to deepen the relations and strengthen the bonds of friendship and cooperation that exist between our two countries for the mutual benefit of our two peoples. I'm here also on another mission, ladies and gentlemen. My visit to your country follows visits paid in the last 2 days to Guyana and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So as I'm sure you must have heard by now, we in Ghana have declared this year, 2019, as the year of return. Right from the day when Ghana got her freedom and independence from British colonial rule on 6 March 1957, the first sub-Saharan state to do so, we have always seen ourselves as owing a special responsibility to Africans in the diaspora. As on that historic occasion, our first leader and first president, Kwame Nkrumah, pledged our country to the total liberation of the African continent and to the realization of the Pan-African project, commitments that continue to guide Ghanaian public policy. I'd like to pay a special tribute to Africans in the diaspora, both as individuals and as states. The African Union recognizes the importance of the diaspora, and that is why the African diaspora is designated as the 6th region of the African Union. Let me also pay homage to several Trinidadians who made important contributions to our fight for freedom and independence from colonial rule, and to our efforts at development in the post-colonial era. I refer here to the Marxist historian, C.L.R. James, to the journalist George Padmore, who was one of Kwame Nkrumah's closest AIDS and who has a library named after him in Accra, and to the eminent economist Sir William Arthur Lewis, who was responsible for much of development planning in the early period of independent Ghana. The Ghanaian people remain appreciative of their work. Trinidad and Tobago might be a big and leading player in the oil and gas sector these days, and Ghana is hoping to increase our collaboration in those fields with Trinidad and Tobago. But for some of us, especially of a certain age, you'll forgive me if the first thing that comes to mind at the mention of Trinidad and Tobago is calypso. Let me therefore pay homage to some of the great Caribbeans who have kept us entertained: Lord Kitchener, Lord Biggener, Sparrow, Calypso Rose, and the others. The rhythms and lyrics still fascinate and captivate. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, we're marking the 400-year anniversary of the first recorded arrival in 1619 of the first 20 enslaved Africans in the Commonwealth of Virginia, which was to become a part of the United States of America, initiating some of the most barbaric episodes in human history: the transatlantic slave trade and slavery. I launched the commemoration of the Year of Return at a ceremony last October in Washington, USA. It has been 400 years of a remarkable history of unassailable triumph over unbelievable adversity. The black people have built and contributed to the success of the Americas and the Caribbean, and even though they did not willingly make the journeys in the 200 years of the slave trade, once there, they were and have been an integral part of the success in their new homes, even though they have not benefited as much as they should have from their toil. For many of the millions of the descendants of these unwilling travelers to the Caribbean, Africa remains a continent of deep emotions and unresolved questions. We want to make Ghana the focus for this anniversary, to enable Africans in the diaspora have a target area to come to. Ghana recognizes this unique position as the location for 75% of the slave dungeons built on the west coast of Africa, through which the slaves were transported. We have a responsibility, and we do extend a hand of welcome back home to Africans in the diaspora. We're hoping that the year will prove to be a joyful and learning experience all round for all of us, especially in affirming our determination that never again shall the African peoples permit themselves to be subjected to such dehumanizing conditions, sold into slavery, and have their freedoms curtailed in order to build up forcibly countries other than their own, and create wealth for the people of unknown lands to which they were sent, wealth from whose enjoyment they were largely excluded. We also want to use the events of this year to solidify our relations with our kith and kin, descendants of Africa, here in the Americas and the Caribbean. After the launch of the Year of Return, we continued with the December 2018 Full Circle Festival, involving over 70 African-American celebrities visiting Ghana to reconnect with their ancestral heritage. They were able to view Ghana, and indeed Africa, from their own lenses, and were able to eat, feel, see. You forget, I'm sorry. The Homecoming and Investment Summit, the African American Investment Forum, the Pan-African and Emancipation Day celebrations, the Durbar from Jamestown to Jamestown Film Festival, and the Full Circle Festival are some of the activities that will be held to commemorate the year-long event. I provided the Honorable Prime Minister with several copies of the provisional program for the Year of Return, and indeed some copies for the media, setting out the prospective dates and times for its activities. The commemoration should enable us in the African Union to consolidate and strengthen our links with our sixth region, i.e. the African diaspora of the so-called New World, which have laid somewhat dormant, and make operational and extend the free movement protocol to those in the diaspora seeking to resettle in Africa. As we mark the 400th anniversary of the start of the transatlantic slave trade, come and visit and let us together demonstrate that we have overcome. It says on the last door leading out of the dungeon from the slave castles that dot our coastline, door of no return. Let us show we can return. We have returned, and we have conquered the humiliation and degradation of 400 years ago. I look forward to many Trinidadians taking up our invitation. May God bless the peoples of Trinidad and Tobago and Ghana and the other peoples of the Caribbean and Africa. I thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to respond to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Excellency. And at this juncture, we'd be happy to receive any questions you may wish to pose to His Excellency or to myself. If you may identify yourself, we'll be happy to be facilitated with knowing who we're talking to.
My name is Sorry, I'm a journalist from Ghana. I'm reliably informed, and I believe that same is true, that sometime in the 80s, there was direct flights from Ghana to, for example, Barbados. But over the time, it looks like you no longer have direct flight connections between just even West Africa and the Caribbean world. So my question is to both presidents. Is there any discussion ongoing to see if there can be an air services agreement between, for example, Ghana and, let's say, Trinidad, onwards to all the other Caribbean countries, considering the fact that we are saying come back home. After this year, we need to still have you coming to our part of the world so that we can connect. So is there any kind of agreement ongoing as far as that is concerned?
I couldn't confirm scheduled flights having been part of our arrangement, but I do know that there were instances of cross-Atlantic flights. But yes, the issue of air transportation and an air service agreement was discussed today, and I would like to ask His Excellency to indicate the nature of those discussions as you see fit.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. I too am not aware that there were these flights, but I mean, perhaps Ghana Airways used to come to Barbados. Well, look at that. You are better informed than I am. So, well, we need to revive that. I mean, it's obvious that if the discussions and the issues we want to address and advance are going to get anywhere, we have to have this direct link, this direct transportation. It's part of the range of things that we spoke about today, and I'm sure that within the framework that we are trying to establish, it is one of the first things that we will address, how to have direct air services links with Trinidad and Tobago and with the other islands in the Caribbean. It's very, very essential that we find a solution to it as soon as possible.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, Mr. Prime Minister. During your little discourse, you said that...
Could you identify yourself, please?
During your little discourse, you said some of the matters discussed were education, energy, diplomacy, and if I'm not mistaken, you said the Venezuela situation. Could you please tell us, expand a little bit on what exactly was discussed?
I mean, speaking specifically about Venezuela or about our general... Well, we discussed an acknowledgement that there is a problem in our region emanating from conditions in Venezuela which has impacted Trinidad and Tobago and the CARICOM and the wider region. We in CARICOM see this matter as requiring international attention. As you would know, our first response from CARICOM was to go to the United Nations General Secretary General's office. That means that we have indicated to the rest of the world that this development requires the attention of others. And as we did so, we had the opportunity to speak to a number of countries, informing them of our position and our concern, and inviting them to pay attention to it. Among those countries invited were countries of the OAU, and particularly South Africa and others. And that is part of our diplomatic response to the Venezuelan situation, requiring international response from the United Nations. Ghana is a country that has a lot in common with Trinidad and Tobago with respect to our diplomatic positions. So we discussed it in that context. And as the international efforts are being made to bring about dialogue within the Venezuelan context, between Venezuelans, other countries of the world are trying to encourage them. And Ghana's role as a leading West African and African country, and on behalf of not just Ghana, but the Caribbean and Venezuela, Ghana would do well to assist in ensuring that there are diplomatic initiatives maintained towards a peaceful solution and a speedy solution to the Venezuelan problem.
Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. President as well, given that the number of migrants estimated to have left Venezuela, I think one human rights organization estimated it to be about 4 million last week. It's a global concern, the movement of Venezuelans out of Venezuela. Did you at all discuss that aspect of it?
No, we did not. We just discussed the nature of the source problem and the response from the international community.
You know that we have already bound in an organization, Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific, so that events that affect any one of the tripartite members of the alliance have necessarily to involve the others. And we're believing that on the African side, whatever we can do also to assist those on this side to be able to have a positive resolution of the crisis in Venezuela. I think it is our moral duty to do so.
On the other part of your question about the diplomatic discussions we've had, you may be aware that at this time the trading arrangements, the preferential trading arrangements that facilitated trade for the benefit of the African, Caribbean, Pacific nations, the ACP, as a bloc in world trade. There are discussions now at the end of those agreements to be towards a new agreement, and there are moves afoot in some quarters to break up the African, Caribbean, Pacific group as a bloc so that our negotiating power would be diminished. It would be extremely detrimental to the Caribbean to find itself in the world environment negotiating as a small bloc. We are better protected and we are stronger as part of the ACP. So our diplomatic initiatives in the post-Cotonou era is to ensure that we lobby all concerned towards a renewal of these agreements within the context of the African, Caribbean, Pacific arrangement and not in a divided way. And in that context, the Caribbean relies on Ghana and our colleagues elsewhere to agree with us in this position and let that be our diplomatic response so that as the new agreements are crafted and come into force, that the ACP body is protected and preserved.
Yes, Julian News from Newsday. Following up on that question, you said that there are moves to break up the ACP bloc. Is what organizations or nations who are making these moves?
Those who believe that that will serve their purpose or that that is an improvement in what we've had many quarters, individuals and organizations. And therefore, we have to protect our interests by ensuring that when the decision is made, that it is made in the context that we preserve the ACP as a bargaining bloc for conditions that will apply to trade with our countries and the rest of the world.
You mentioned in the earlier discussions, energy came up. I'm wondering, was there any talk of any bilateral agreements or anything, any cooperation?
Well, we do have some advanced discussions in place, and we have memorandum of understanding signed between Ghana and Trinidad and Tobago, which would facilitate business in that way. And having had that, you may recall when I visited Ghana in 2016, we did sign a couple of agreements. We had heads of agreement between the countries and the National Gas Company, and the Ghana equivalents had signed agreements to proceed to try and work together towards doing business. And we are currently close to an arrangement where some business could come out of that. It takes some time to get the negotiations done, but I'm confident that in the not too distant future, based on the advice that I've received from Ghana, that our agreements could see business developments in the not too distant future.
Just to add a few words to what the Prime Minister is saying. We're aware that Trinidad and Tobago has been in the oil and gas industry for close to 100 years. We're relatively new. So there's every reason why technical cooperation and technical assistance in this area would make a lot of sense for Ghana. So we are very, very committed to the idea of sitting down and working out the actual details of such cooperation and assistance. It is one of the important matters that we addressed today in the bilateral talks that we had.
Mr. Prime Minister, I know you mentioned...
Yes, good evening.
Shalisa Hassan Ali from the Trinidad Guardian. Mr. Prime Minister, you mentioned last week that Africans can register. Was this part of the discussions with the President? And also, can you tell me if the issue of Ghanaian migrants at the IDC was discussed?
Yes, that came up today, and we did mention last week that we would see what we have. As a matter of fact, it turns out that there's only one Ghanaian in our immigration detention center. And I did say to His Excellency today, speaking for the Minister of National Security, and based on the commitment made, that in honor of the presence of the President of Ghana here, we would do what I said last week would be done, which is providing there are no criminal labels attached to this individual, that we would use the provisions under the authority of the Minister of National Security to have such person put out into the population of Trinidad and Tobago. We do have a few Nigerians there as well, not many, but they have been there for quite some time. And the main reason why they're there is because of the logistics of deportation, extremely expensive and difficult to obtain, even with the cost being paid. So we take the opportunity to deal with that matter once and for all for these few people, as long as there are no criminal associations involved. Yes?
Just on continuing on that question, I know when the issue was raised in Parliament, the National Security Minister said he had to, well, I think take a note or take something to the National Security Council. Has that been done?
Not yet. These are the formalities, but the decision to do so is pretty much taken once there are no impediments. So the paperwork would be done. If there are no other questions, we thank you very much for attending and honoring our distinguished guests. Thank you very much.